there everyone, this is Vicki from Eternal Athena Tarot and welcome to episode number 2 of the 10 Minute Tarot Tutor. So today in this video I want to talk about reversals. I'm actually going to be talking about this in a series of videos and basically my approach to reading reversals. Now reversal, what I mean by that is basically when a tarot card appears upside down in your spread, like so. So instead of taking the regular upright meaning of this card, when it appears upside down, we usually bring a slightly different variation of the meaning or a nuanced understanding of what this card might mean to the overall spread. There are many ways to read reversals, and to backpedal a bit, some people don't even use reversals. So reversals is something you can use if you want to. Many people don't use reversals because, well, I actually did a tarot class on this a couple weeks ago, and I asked some of my students, well, for those of you who don't read reversals, what are some of the reasons why you would avoid them? And I was pretty surprised to hear that some people reported that they fear this idea of reversals, that it injects too much negativity into a reading. My thoughts on that are, when you are reading tarot, that usually it's because there's something in your life that's not going the way you would want it to, that there is some kind of blockage or obstacle that you were hoping to identify so that you can find a way around that issue. So I read reversals specifically to highlight the negative areas of a situation, and that's not something I personally shy away from, although I can understand why some people would not want to see too much of that, because it can be uncomfortable trying to convey, a negative reading to your client or your to whoever's, who you're reading the cards for. But my approach to reversals is that these are cards that are going to highlight for us areas in the situation that need to be paid greater attention to, or maybe challenges that the querent is coming up against. And the great thing about reversals is that once you've identified what that is, then you can follow up in an additional reading and pull some more cards to ask, well, what can I do to get around this situation? But that's the purpose of reversals for me. You don't have to use reversals. There are other ways to get around this kind of information. Many people use elemental dignities, which I think is, I'll discuss that in a different video, but there are alternate ways to read a card in its quote-unquote ill-dignified position, and reversals is one of them. So with that, I'm going to get into some of the ways that we can interpret reverse cards when they appear in a reading. I'm going to go through a few examples. Now, the most common method that people have is to simply take the opposite meaning of that card. And that is definitely valid. I'm not going to discredit that. That's a method that many readers use. Although in my own personal practice, I don't read reversals in this way, mainly because I find that there are already cards in tarot that reflect the opposite meaning of a certain card, simply because duality is a theme that comes up again and again and again in tarot. Remember, duality is the idea that we have opposites who meet each other, and we need to find ways to get along with our opposite or integrate ourselves with our opposite. And that's pretty much, that comes up a lot in the major arcana, for instance. I'm going to use the example of the Magician card, which is number 1 in the major arcana. So this is a card that usually comes up to signify themes of power, the idea of being able to manipulate the outer circumstances of your, oops, I'm sorry, that was my table there, of your world. And the sometimes it's also about having confidence, or about projecting your identity. This is card number 1. The Magician, will see in the symbology of this card, we see a man who is holding a wand up towards the sky, and I usually read this card as about channeling the divine power, channeling the powers that God gave you in order to create the world that you want. So this is a very extroverted card. It's a very yang card. It's a masculine card in tarot, and it's about asserting your will onto your outside circumstances. We already see the kind of the opposite meaning of this card come up in the High Priestess, which is number 2. So usually when we read these two cards together, the Magician and the High Priestess, this is the card that signifies outward consciousness. This is the card, the High Priestess. We see in this card, it's the image of a woman, and she's sitting in between two pillars. And this is actually a card that comes up to signify the division of our, conscious lives, in front of the veil, from our unconscious lives. And when she comes up in a reading, she's usually here to signify qualities that are actually the opposite of the magician. So instead of moving outwards, we're now looking within, going inwards. Instead of this emphasis on controlling the outside circumstances of your world, in the High Priestess, we see an emphasis on learning how to let go, how to accept things as they are, and how to reflect. And where in this card we see this idea of being able to manipulate and control. Again, in this card we see that she's not really doing that much by way of action. She's, it's a card that sometimes comes in to signify passivity. And, where this card is about the conscious self, the High Priestess is about the subconscious or unconscious self. So to read the Magician reversed as the complete opposite of its meaning, to me, I already see cards that would come up if that was really the case. So when I read reversals, I bring, I don't use that meaning, although that's a meaning that's commonly, I know that's out there, I've heard that so many times in my experience as a reader. But I'm going to discuss one interpretation, one way I interpret reversals, and that is to read them as breakthrough moments. These are moments when the querent suddenly realizing they need to let go of something, release something, in order to move on to the next level of understanding, move on to the next plateau. So I'm going to run through 3 examples to show you how this works. The first example, let's say I have a querent who comes to me and the question is, what do I need to know about my current job situation? We got a person who is unhappy with her current position, unhappy with her current job. She's not sure whether to remain in her current job or to maybe leave and find something else to do. And let's say, in response to that question, what do I need to know about my current job situation? One of the cards we get is the 8 of Swords. And let's say this comes in reversed. Well, I'm going to start by talking about the upright meaning of this card. So we see in this card there are some symbols here. There's a woman surrounded by 7 swords, which are behind her. And this is a card that traditionally comes up to signify restrictions, lack of being able to move, or for me, this is actually not about, actual restrictions, but the feeling or the thinking. There's something in your mentality that's holding you back from moving forward. And, Swords is a very, it's a suit that speaks to thinking, to your intellect, to ideas, to communication. So if we got this card reversed, I really love when the 8 of Swords comes up reversed because I feel that the imagery of this card plays in so well and works so well with reversals. We see that the blindfold falls off. The rope that binds her falls off. And this is no longer about, feeling inept. It's no longer about feeling like you have no agency or that you can't see a way out. But now we see that she is able to, perhaps she takes the reverse position or looks at the situation from a upside down perspective, kind of like the hangman, that the blindfold falls off, that her ropes fall off, and that she's perhaps able to, maybe this is the break through to a new way of seeing the situation and being able to, deal with things a different way based on what she sees. That's one example, the 8 of Swords. Let's say we have another question, and this time the question is, one of the most common questions I get are about love and when I'm going to meet somebody. So when am I going to meet someone new? And let's say in response to that, we get the 5 of Wands. Now thinking about what it means to read reversals in the breakthrough. So in the upright position, this is about competition. Usually it's about healthy competition. We see that the people in this card are fighting each other on, level playing ground. It doesn't look like it's a vicious, malicious fight. It looks like these guys are just kind of batting it out, kind of like maybe like playing a sport or that kind of competition. It's pretty friendly. But in a dating situation, this could sometimes, this actually came up for me in a reading I was doing for a friend, and she had a similar question, and the interpretation I got, or the hit I got, was this is about fear of having to be competitive, or fear that you won't be competitive, fear that, that people are just going to pass me over because there are better options out there, and that was actually what's holding her back from getting out there on the dating market, on the dating scene. So in the reverse position, how we can read this as a breakthrough, so we can see this as a new way of thinking, a new way of approaching dating, and a new way of looking at the situation. So it's no longer an emphasis on the competition, but once she realizes that it's not so much about that, it's really about her intention and putting her energy out there and showing the universe that she's really intent on meeting someone, that the time is now right for her to meet someone, that thinking is, when that thinking drops off, then she'll be ready to meet someone. So it's not so much, letting go of those fears surrounding not being good enough when compared to other people who are on like OkCupid, let's say. That's when she's going to meet someone. So that's one example of how we could read a reversal in terms of its breakthrough meaning. Now let's stick to the same question, and let's say we had the Three of Swords. Now in relationship readings, this card almost always signifies some kind of pain or trauma or heartbreak. It's a pretty stark looking card that we have here with the Three Swords impaling a heart. And it's not, it's not hard to interpret this in terms of someone who's suffered, let's say, a recent breakup, or is trying to get over still in the process of getting over a relationship that was very difficult. Now, if we use the same question, when will I meet somebody, and we get the Three of Swords reversed, then the breakthrough moment is going to come when they process the pain, when that pain is now behind them. And once that's behind them, they will be ready to meet somebody new. So that's all I have for today. That's method number 1, reading reversals as breakthroughs. And if you are interested in learning more about reversals, I am going to be hosting my own online class this February 25th. And the link to that is below if you'd like to enroll in that. Do please check it out. I also have the link to my webpage. You can go read more about that. And that is all for now. I will see you guys later.